The Outcast. The Galactic Trading Station. Nexus 7 hummed with the constant chatter of 100 different species conducting business across the void. Towering Vorthak merchants haggled over shipments of crystallized energy, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming under the artificial lights. Graceful Etherian diplomats floated past on anti-grav platforms, their translucent forms shimmering like living glass. Massive Corellian engineers stomped through the corridors, each step reverberating through the metal floors as they discussed infrastructure projects spanning entire star systems. And then there was Marcus Chen. At barely 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighing less than most species' children, Marcus moved through the crowd like a ghost. His plain brown hair and unremarkable features drew no attention from the exotic beings surrounding him. The universal translator in his ear buzzed constantly with fragments of conversations, most of which seemed to revolve around the same topic: how pathetically weak the humans were. "Look at that tiny thing," rumbled a Corellian as Marcus passed. "How did such a fragile species ever make it off their home planet?" His companion, a serpentine Sithrak, with scales that shifted from green to purple, hissed in amusement. "I heard they can't even lift twice their own body weight. My hatchlings are stronger." Marcus kept his expression neutral, though his jaw tightened slightly. 6 months he'd been working on Nexus 7 as a cultural liaison, and 6 months he'd endured the constant ridicule. The Galactic Council had insisted on human representation in their trade networks, but it was clear that most species viewed Earth's inclusion as a charitable gesture rather than recognition of any real worth. The human quarters were located in Section C, the least desirable area of the station. The gravity was set too high for comfort. The air recyclers produced a constant low hum that interfered with sleep, and the walls were thin enough that every conversation in the adjacent alien quarters could be heard. It was, Marcus had realized long ago, a not-so-subtle reminder of humanity's place in the galactic hierarchy. His communicator chimed as he entered his cramped office. The holographic display showed the stern face of Administrator Veltar, a hegemony official whose species resembled oversized praying mantises with far too many eyes. "Human Chen?" The administrator's mandibles clicked together in what Marcus had learned was their equivalent of a dismissive snort. "Report to Docking Bay 12 immediately. We have a situation." The transmission cut off before Marcus could respond. He grabbed his standard-issue tablet and headed for the docking bays, wondering what fresh humiliation awaited him. In his 6 months here, situations involving humans usually meant someone needed a scapegoat for a diplomatic incident. Docking Bay 12 was in chaos when Marcus arrived. Security personnel from 3 different species stood in a wide circle around something at the center of the bay, their weapons drawn but not quite aimed. The air thrummed with tension so thick it was almost visible. At the center of the circle stood the most terrifying creature Marcus had ever seen. It was roughly humanoid in shape, but stood nearly 9 feet tall. Its skin was a deep obsidian black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Muscle rippled beneath that dark surface with each breath, and when it moved, Marcus caught glimpses of what looked like metallic implants or natural armor plating along its limbs and torso. Its face was partially obscured by what appeared to be breathing apparatus, but the eyes that burned above it were a fierce golden yellow. The creature's head turned slowly, scanning the assembled security forces with obvious contempt. When those burning eyes fell on Marcus, however, something changed. The predator's stance shifted almost imperceptibly, and its head tilted in what might have been curiosity. "Ah, Human Chen!" Administrator Veltar skittered over on his 6 legs, staying well clear of the circle. "This being claims to be from the Apex Dominion. They've requested a diplomatic meeting but refused to communicate with anyone except—" His mandibles clicked in obvious distaste. "A human representative." Marcus felt his stomach drop. The Apex Dominion was legendary throughout the galaxy, spoken of in hushed whispers in the darkest corners of space stations. They were apex predators from the galactic rim, a species so dangerous that even the mighty Carillions gave them a wide berth. No one had seen an apex in the core systems for over 50 years, and now one was asking specifically for him. "What do they want?" Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "That's what you're going to find out," Veltar replied. "Consider this a test of human usefulness. Try not to get yourself killed. The paperwork would be tremendous." Marcus stepped forward, acutely aware of how small he looked next to the towering figure. The security personnel shifted nervously, their weapons tracking his movement. The Apex warrior watched him approach with those unsettling golden eyes, but made no threatening moves. "I'm Marcus Chen," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I understand you wanted to speak with a human representative." The Apex warrior studied him for a long moment. When it finally spoke, its voice was a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through Marcus's bones. The universal translator struggled with the complex phonemes before finally producing recognizable words. "You are small," the warrior said, and Marcus heard several of the security personnel snicker. "But you did not run when others drew weapons. You did not hide behind the weak ones who sent you forward." Marcus wasn't sure how to respond to that, so he simply nodded. The Apex warrior continued, its golden eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "I am War Prime Thaxtar of the Dominion. I come with a message for the humans of this galaxy." "What message?" Marcus asked. "That the time of the great hunt approaches," Thaxtar replied. "And when it comes, your species will need to choose, stand with the hunters or become the prey." The docking bay fell silent except for the ambient hum of the station's life support systems. Marcus felt every eye on him, waiting to see how the weak human would respond to what sounded very much like a threat from one of the galaxy's most feared species. But as Marcus looked up into those burning golden eyes, he saw something that the others had missed, something that made his pulse quicken, not with fear, but with an emotion he couldn't quite identify. Recognition. "And what makes you think humans would be suitable for hunting?" Marcus asked carefully. Thaxtar's mouth stretched into what might have been a smile, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "Because I have been watching your species, small one. I have seen the records of your wars, your hunts, your survival against impossible odds. I have seen what you do to those who threaten your pack." The Apex warrior took a step closer, and Marcus forced himself not to retreat. This close, he could smell something that reminded him oddly of ozone and burnt metal. "The others mock you for your size," Thaxtar continued, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "They see your small stature and assume weakness. But they do not understand what I understand." "And what's that?" Marcus asked. "That on your world, the most dangerous predators are often the smallest ones." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Around the bay, he could see the other species shifting uncomfortably, finally beginning to sense that something was happening here that they didn't understand. "Tell me, human Marcus," Thaxtar said, "what is the most feared predator on your homeworld?" Marcus thought for a moment. "That would depend on what you mean by feared. The largest predators are things like polar bears or great white sharks. But if you're talking about the most dangerous to humans specifically—" "Yes," Thaxtar prompted. "Mosquitoes," Marcus said quietly. "They kill more humans every year than any other animal." The Apex warrior's breathing apparatus hissed in what Marcus was beginning to recognize as laughter. "Exactly. The tiniest hunters carrying death in their bite. Your species understands this principle better than most." Thaxtar straightened to his full height, once again surveying the room full of armed guards. I will return in 7 of your days, human Marcus. Consider my words carefully. The galaxy is about to change, and your species will need allies in what is coming. The pack gathers. The emergency council meeting was called within hours of Thaxtar's departure, though Marcus suspected it had more to do with panic than genuine diplomatic concern. The Grand Council chamber of Nexus 7 was a massive circular room designed to accommodate dozens of different species with specialized environmental zones for each delegation. Marcus sat in the human section, a small area with standard Earth gravity and atmosphere, while representatives from 15 other species filled the vast amphitheater around him. The air shimmered with translation fields as dozens of languages were converted into comprehensible speech. Chancellor Mordoun, the station's senior administrator and a member of the powerful celestial hegemony, called the session to order. Her species resembled living crystalline formations with light patterns that shifted across their surfaces to indicate emotion. Right now, those patterns were flashing an alarmed shade of orange. "We are here to address the unprecedented visit from the Apex Dominion," Chancellor Mordoun announced, her crystalline voice echoing through the chamber. "Counselor Chen, please provide a full report of your interaction with the warrior-designated Thaxtar." Marcus stood, acutely aware of how every eye in the chamber was focused on him. 6 months of being overlooked and dismissed, and now suddenly he was the center of galactic attention. War Prime Thaxtar delivered what he called a message, Marcus began. He spoke of something called the Great Hunt and suggested that humanity would need to choose sides. "Choose sides in what?" demanded General Korath, the Corellian military representative. His massive frame dominated his species section, and when he spoke, his voice rumbled like an avalanche. "The Apex Dominion hasn't been seen in core systems for decades. Why are they suddenly interested in galactic politics? More importantly," added Ambassador Silith, her serpentine form coiled elegantly in the Sithrak section, "why did they specifically request a human representative? No offense to Counselor Chen, but humans are hardly major players in galactic affairs." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Marcus had heard variations of this sentiment countless times, but now he found it annoying rather than demoralizing. "Perhaps," Marcus said, his voice carrying further than he'd expected, "that's exactly why they wanted to speak with us." The chamber fell silent. Chancellor Mordoun's light pattern shifted to a curious blue-green. "Explain." Marcus had been thinking about this since Thaxtar left, and the more he considered it, the more certain he became. Every species here represents some form of conventional power. The Corellians have military might, the Etherians have advanced technology, the Vorthak control trade routes, the hegemony has political influence. But humans, we're the outsiders. We're not invested in the current power structure. "Because you're too weak to matter," General Korath rumbled. "Or because we're too new to be corrupted by it," Marcus countered, and he noticed several representatives shift uncomfortably. Before anyone could respond, the chamber's alert system activated. Emergency lights bathed the room in red as a holographic display materialized above the central dais. "Incoming transmission from the Terran system," announced the station's AI. "Priority Alpha diplomatic channel." The hologram resolved into the image of Admiral Sarah Reyes, head of Earth's Stellar Defense Force. Marcus had met her once during his orientation, and she'd struck him as the kind of person who could stare down a supernova without blinking. "Nexus 7 Council," Admiral Reyes said without preamble. "We've received Counselor Chen's report about contact with the Apex Dominion. Earth Command has authorized me to share certain classified information in light of this development." Chancellor Mordoun's light patterns flashed rapid amber, the hegemony equivalent of raised eyebrows. "What information?" For the past 18 months, our deep space monitoring stations have been detecting massive fleet movements along the galactic rim. Ships moving in formation, heading toward the core systems. We estimate at least 40 different species are involved, many we've never seen before. The chamber erupted in alarmed chatter. General Korath's voice boomed over the others. Why wasn't this information shared with the Council? Admiral Reyes's expression didn't change. Because every time humans try to contribute intelligence to this Council, we're told our technology is too primitive to be reliable. Our warnings about pirate activity in the Centauri Reach were ignored. Our reports about energy signatures near the Veil Nebula were dismissed, so we stopped sharing. Marcus felt a surge of pride at the Admiral's words, but also a growing sense of unease. If Earth had been tracking these fleet movements... Admiral, Marcus said, what's your assessment of this great hunt that Thaxtar mentioned? Based on the data we've collected, Counselor, I believe we're looking at the largest military mobilization in galactic history. Species that have been isolated on the rim for centuries are suddenly moving in coordinated fashion, and they're all heading this way. The chamber fell silent again, but this time the quiet was heavy with dread rather than surprise. How long do we have? Chancellor Morden asked. Our best estimate is 6 months before the first wave reaches the outer colonies. Maybe 8, if we're lucky. Ambassador Silith's scales had shifted to a pale, fearful silver. What do they want? Unknown, Admiral Reyes replied. But given that they specifically reached out to humanity first, I'm sending additional resources to support Counselor Chen. You're about to become much more important to galactic security, Marcus. The transmission ended, leaving the Council in stunned silence. Marcus looked around the chamber and saw fear in every alien face. The galaxy's most powerful species, who had dismissed humanity as irrelevant for so long, were suddenly realizing they might need the weak little humans after all. Chancellor Mordoon's light patterns had shifted to a deep purple, extreme concern. Counselor Chen, what did the Apex Warrior mean when he said humans understand that small doesn't mean weak? Marcus thought about Earth's history, about the way humans had survived and thrived in spite of being physically inferior to most of the large predators on their homeworld, about asymmetric warfare, about guerrilla tactics, about the way small, mobile forces could defeat much larger armies through superior strategy and adaptability. I think, Marcus said slowly, he meant that we've learned to be dangerous in ways that don't depend on size or strength. And you believe this great hunt is some kind of test? General Korath asked. I think it's a culling, Marcus replied, the words coming to him with sudden clarity. The Rim species have been watching the core worlds, studying us. They've seen how comfortable we've become, how dependent on technology and established power structures. I think they're coming to separate the hunters from the prey. And they see humans as potential hunters? Ambassador Silith's voice carried a note of disbelief. Marcus remembered Thaxtar's burning golden eyes. The way the Apex Warrior had looked at him with something that might have been respect. I think they see us as kindred spirits. We're both species that learn to be dangerous despite our disadvantages. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. The council chambers became a hive of frantic planning as species that had rarely cooperated suddenly found themselves forced to work together. Military assets were repositioned, supply lines were secured, and defensive alliances were hastily negotiated. Marcus found himself at the center of it all, no longer the ignored human representative, but a crucial link to understanding the coming threat. Species that had barely acknowledged his existence now hung on his every word, desperate for insights into the Apex mindset. But as the days passed, Marcus began to notice something troubling. The other species were approaching the crisis exactly as they always had, through conventional thinking, traditional power structures, and established hierarchies. The Carillions wanted to meet the threat with overwhelming force. The Etherians proposed technological solutions. The Vorthak suggested economic incentives. None of them seemed to understand what Thaxtar had been trying to tell them. On the sixth day, as Marcus sat in his quarters reviewing defensive plans that all looked remarkably similar, his door chimed. He opened it to find a young Etherian named Zixara, one of the few aliens on the station who had ever treated him as an equal rather than a curiosity. "May I come in?" she asked, her translucent form shimmering with nervous energy. "Of course," Marcus replied, stepping aside. Zixara glided into the room and turned to face him. "I've been thinking about what you said in the council meeting, about the Rim species seeing humans as kindred spirits. What about it?" "I think you're wrong," she said quietly. "I don't think they see you as kindred spirits. I think they see you as competitors." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" "Think about it," Zixara continued. "Every species in the galaxy has evolved in its own niche. We Etherians became beings of pure energy to survive our homeworld's radiation storms. The Carillions developed The hunt begins. Docking Bay 12 was packed with representatives from every species on the station, but this time, no one was laughing at the human. Marcus stood at the center of a defensive formation that would have been unthinkable a week ago. Carillion soldiers flanking him, Etherian tech specialists monitoring their equipment, even Vorthak security personnel checking their weapons. The massive bay doors cycled open with a pneumatic hiss that echoed through the chamber. What emerged was not the single, sleek vessel that had brought Thaxtar before, but a formation of 5 ships that looked like they'd been carved from living shadow. Each craft was the size of a small destroyer, their hulls seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. War Prime Thaxtar was the first to disembark, but he wasn't alone. 4 other Apex warriors followed him, each one slightly different in build and bearing, but all radiating the same predatory confidence. The assembled aliens tensed visibly as the group approached, weapons instinctively tracking the new arrivals. But Thaxtar raised a massive hand, and the gesture somehow conveyed both greeting and warning. His golden eyes found Marcus immediately, and that unsettling smile spread across his features. "Human Marcus," the War Prime rumbled, his voice carrying easily across the bay. "You look troubled. Has our early arrival caused concern?" "Some," Marcus admitted, stepping forward despite the obvious reluctance of his escorts. "We weren't expecting you for another day." "Time grows short," Thaxtar replied. "The first wave of the hunt arrives in hours, not days. We came to offer you one final chance to understand what you face." Chancellor Morden's crystalline form pushed through the crowd, her light patterns flashing urgent orange. "War Prime, the Galactic Council demands to know the nature of this threat. We have prepared defensive—" Thaxtar's laugh cut her off, a sound like grinding metal that made everyone in the bay flinch. "Defenses? Against the hunt? You understand nothing." One of the other Apex warriors, whose scarred hide suggested countless battles, stepped forward. "The hunt is not war as you soft-worlders understand it. It is evolution. It is the galaxy's way of separating those who deserve to survive from those who have grown weak." "And who decides who deserves to survive?" General Korath demanded, his massive frame bristling with barely contained aggression. "The hunt decides," Thaxtar replied simply, "as it has for 1,000,000 years. Species rise, grow comfortable, become soft. Then the hunt comes to test them. Those who remember how to fight, how to adapt, how to survive, they continue. The rest—" He shrugged, a gesture that conveyed inevitable extinction. Marcus felt pieces clicking into place in his mind. This has happened before. Many times, the scarred Apex confirmed. "We are one of the few species to have survived multiple hunts. Each time, the galaxy grows stronger, more vital. The weak are culled, and the strong inherit the stars." "And you think humans might survive?" Marcus asked. Thaxtar studied him with those burning eyes. We think humans might do more than survive. We think you might thrive. The War Prime gestured to his companions, and they spread out in a loose formation that somehow managed to look both casual and threatening. Tell me, human Marcus, what did your admiral share with the Council about our fleet movements? Marcus hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. But something in Thaxtar's expression suggested the Apex already knew the answer. She said you've been monitoring 40 species moving toward the core systems. Coordinated military action. 47 species, actually, Thaxtar corrected, but close enough. Now tell me, what did your people conclude about our intentions? That you're planning some kind of invasion, a massive assault on the established galactic order. Thaxtar's breathing apparatus hissed in what Marcus had learned was amusement. Not invasion, evaluation. Each species in the hunt has been assigned targets based on their capabilities. The strong face the strong. The weak face the weak. Everyone gets tested according to their nature. And humans? Marcus asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. Humans get us, the scarred Apex said, and there was something that might have been approval in his voice. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. While the other species would face opponents potentially weaker than themselves, humanity would be tested against the galaxy's apex predators. It should have been terrifying, but instead Marcus felt something unexpected. Excitement. You're giving us a chance to prove ourselves, he said. We are giving you a chance to become what you were meant to be, Thaxtar replied. But first, you must choose. Fight with us as allies, or stand with these others as their protectors. Chancellor Morton's light patterns flashed desperate yellow. Counselor Chen, surely you cannot seriously consider— The choice is his, Thaxtar interrupted, his voice carrying absolute authority. As it should be. The strong choose their own paths. Marcus looked around the bay at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. 6 months ago, they had mocked him for his size, dismissed his species as irrelevant, treated humanity as a curiosity rather than an equal partner. Now they looked at him with desperate hope, finally recognizing that the small human might be their only link to survival. But as he met their eyes, Marcus realized something that surprised him. He didn't feel anger or resentment toward them. He felt protective. War Prime, Marcus said, turning back to Thaxtar. If I choose to stand with them, what happens? Then you face us in the hunt, the Apex replied without hesitation. And we discover whether your species truly deserves the respect we believe they do. And if I choose to stand with you? Then you help us cull the weak, and when the hunt ends, your species takes its place among the galaxy's true predators. The bay fell silent, except for the ambient hum of the station's systems. Marcus could feel the weight of countless eyes upon him, waiting for a decision that would determine not just humanity's fate, but the future of galactic civilization itself. Marcus thought about Earth's history, about the way humans had always chosen to protect those weaker than themselves, even when it wasn't in their best interest. About how they'd learned to be dangerous not for conquest, but for defense. About the way they'd survived not by being the strongest, but by being the most stubborn. I choose to stand with them, Marcus said quietly. Thaxtar's smile widened, showing more of those razor-sharp teeth. I hoped you would say that. Before anyone could react, the War Prime's hand shot out and grasped Marcus's shoulder. But instead of crushing it, as everyone expected, Thaxtar's grip was firm but gentle. You see, he said, addressing the assembled crowd, this is why humans interest us. Any other species would have chosen the path of least resistance, self-preservation over principle. But humans— He looked down at Marcus with something that was unmistakably respect. Humans choose the harder path because it's the right path. The scarred apex warrior nodded approvingly. The hunt tests more than just strength or cunning. It tests character. And this small one has just proven that his species possesses the most dangerous trait of all. Which is? General Korath asked. Honor, Thaxtar replied. The willingness to fight not for victory, but for what is right. It makes them unpredictable, unstoppable. Marcus felt a strange warmth spreading through his chest. Does this mean? It means the hunt begins now, Thaxtar said, releasing his shoulder. And we look forward to facing worthy opponents for the first time in decades. The apex warriors began moving back toward their ships, but Thaxtar paused at the airlock. Human Marcus, he called back. When your fleets arrive to defend this station, remember what I told you about small predators. Size means nothing. Intent is everything. Our fleets? Marcus asked, confused. Thaxtar's laugh echoed through the bay as he disappeared into his ship. Did you truly think Earth would leave their representative undefended? Your Admiral Reyes is thorough. As if on cue, the station's sensors detected new contacts entering the system. The tactical display showed a formation of sleek human warships, smaller than most alien vessels but moving with predatory grace through the void. Admiral Reyes's voice crackled over the comm system. Nexus 7, this is Task Force Terran. We're here to provide humanitarian assistance and ensure the safety of all civilian populations during this crisis. Marcus couldn't help but smile. Humanitarian assistance. Trust humans to turn a galactic trial by combat into a rescue mission. Chancellor Morden's light patterns had shifted to amazed gold. Counselor Chen, your species mobilized a military response in less than a week. We've been ready for something like this since we first left Earth, Marcus replied. We just never knew what form it would take. The next few hours passed in controlled chaos as human forces took up defensive positions around the station. The other species watched in fascination as Earth's military demonstrated tactics they'd never seen before. Small, fast ships working in coordinated groups, using mobility and adaptability to create defensive networks that seemed impossible to break. When the hunt finally arrived, it came not as a massive invasion force, but as individual challenges. Each species faced opponents suited to their nature and capabilities. The Carillions battled massive siege ships in tests of pure strength. The Etherians engaged in complex technological warfare against energy beings from the galactic rim. The Vorthak found themselves in economic competition that turned deadly when trade negotiations became boarding actions. But humans faced the Apex Dominion itself. The battle that followed lasted 3 days and became legend throughout the galaxy. Not because humanity won, though they did, eventually, but because of how they fought. Human ships that should have been destroyed by superior firepower instead adapted, evolved, found new ways to survive and strike back. Human crews that should have broken under pressure instead became more dangerous the longer the fight continued. And at the center of it all was Marcus Chen, the small human who had chosen to stand with the weak against the strong, coordinating defenses and evacuation efforts while the fleets battled in the void above. When Thaxtar finally called an end to the hunt, his ships withdrawing to the edge of the system, the message he sent was brief but profound. The hunt acknowledges humanity as worthy. You have earned your place among the stars not through conquest, but through courage. The galaxy is stronger for your presence. In the aftermath, as the various species counted their losses and celebrated their survival, Marcus found himself once again standing in Docking Bay 12. But this time he wasn't alone. Representatives from a dozen species stood with him, no longer seeing him as a curiosity, but as a protector. Chancellor Morden's light patterns glowed with warm amber as she approached. Counselor Chen. The Galactic Council has voted unanimously to offer humanity full membership with all associated privileges and responsibilities. Marcus nodded, but his attention was focused on the small view screen, showing the human fleet maintaining its defensive positions. We accept, but with conditions. Name them, General Korath rumbled, his tone respectful for the first time. The hunt showed us that the galaxy needs protectors, not just predators. Humanity will take that role seriously. We'll defend any species that asks for our help, regardless of their size or strength or political importance. Ambassador Silith's scales shimmered with approving blue-green. And in return, Marcus smiled, thinking about mosquitoes and persistence hunters and the way small predators could change the world. In return, never again assume that small means weak. Sometimes the most dangerous hunters are the ones you don't see coming. Above them, the human fleet continued its patrol, small ships moving with quiet confidence through the void. The galaxy had learned an important lesson during the hunt. Size didn't determine strength, and the most dangerous predators weren't always the biggest ones. They were the ones that never gave up. They were the ones that stood between the hunters and the prey, no matter the cost. They were human, massive size and strength to dominate their gravity-heavy planet. The Sithrak became masters of camouflage and stealth in their jungle worlds. And humans? Humans became persistence hunters. You learn to track prey across vast distances, to never give up, to adapt to any environment. You became the species that just won't quit. Zixara's form flickered with what he'd learned was anxiety. That's not a kindred spirit to an apex predator, Marcus. That's competition. Before Marcus could respond, every alarm on the station began to sound simultaneously. Emergency lights bathed the corridor in red as the station's AI announced, "Multiple contacts detected entering the system. Apex Dominion vessels confirmed. War Prime Thaxtar is returning early." Marcus and Zixara exchanged glances, then ran for the docking bays. Whatever was about to happen, the real test was beginning. The warrior moved toward his ship with surprising grace for such a large being. As he reached the airlock, he paused and looked back at Marcus. "Do not let them convince you that small means weak, young hunter. Sometimes the smallest blade cuts deepest," and with that, he was gone, leaving Marcus standing alone in a circle of very confused and increasingly concerned alien security forces. Administrator Veltar skittered forward, his compound eyes fixed on Marcus with new interest. What did it mean by the great hunt approaches? What was all that nonsense about mosquitoes? Marcus looked around at the assembled aliens. The towering Corellians with their massive frames, the ethereal Etherians with their superior technology, the chitinous Vorthak with their economic power, and for the first time since arriving on Nexus 7, he smiled. "I think," he said quietly, "we need to send a message to Earth."